When I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed. My husband, Alex, and I had been trying for a baby, and finally, it was happening. At 28, I felt ready to embrace motherhood. My family, including Alex's parents, was thrilled when we shared the news. Well, almost everyone. My mother, Eleanor, wasn't pleased, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. To her, the sun rose and set on my younger sister, Lily. She was 25 and spoiled beyond belief. Ever since my father passed away 3 years ago, my relationship with my mother has been strained. I stayed in contact out of a promise I'd made to my dad, to look after her. He didn't trust Lily to handle the responsibility. So, out of loyalty to him, I tried to maintain some semblance of a connection. When I was about 6 months pregnant, Lily got engaged to her boyfriend of 3 years. Anyone with basic math skills would know that by the time Lily's wedding rolled around, I would have already had my baby. But Lily and her fiancé, Mark, weren't planning a quick wedding. They wanted something elaborate and grand, a ceremony that would take time to plan. 2 weeks after Lily's engagement, my mother showed up at my house. Her expression was pinched, her eyes full of worry. I thought she had come to share the engagement news, but it quickly became clear that she had other motives. "Emily," she said, her voice tight, "you need to do something about this pregnancy. I don't want you ruining Lily's big day." I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about, Mom?" She wrung her hands together, her gaze flickering around the room as if someone else might be listening. "Lily's wedding needs to be the main focus. Your baby will take the attention away from her. It's just bad timing." I was stunned. "Are you serious right now? It's not like people are going to skip her wedding just because I had a baby. Besides, I'm not even invited to her wedding. She didn't come to mine and we're not friends." Her face tightened and she snapped, "You need to hide your pregnancy. Don't tell anyone. Don't let anyone know about the baby." The absurdity of her demand left me speechless. "That's insane. I'm not hiding my child because of Lily's wedding. We fought, and it was the last straw. My promise to my father was suffocating me, and her request was beyond unreasonable." After that, I cut her off completely. I felt guilty, but it was better than dealing with her toxic behavior while heavily pregnant. In the weeks leading up to my due date, Alex and his family supported me entirely. My mother wasn't there for any of it. When I finally gave birth to our son, she didn't show up, despite Alex calling her. She was out with Lily. Deep down, I knew she wouldn't have come even if she were free. I wasn't her priority, and I had to accept that bitter truth. For a while, I settled into my new life with my husband, our son, and the warm support of Alex's family. But peace didn't last long. A few days ago, my phone buzzed relentlessly with missed calls and frantic texts from my mother. The messages were urgent, pleading with me to answer. I hesitated. My instinct was to ignore her, but the promise to my father tugged at my conscience. Reluctantly, I picked up the phone. Her voice was shaky, on the verge of tears. "Emily, something terrible has happened. I need your help." "What is it, Mom?" My patience was thin. She took a deep breath, and her words came out in a rushed whisper. "I tried to put your baby up for adoption." I froze. "What did you just say?" "I didn't mean to. I thought it would be best for everyone. I told the adoption agency that you and Alex were unfit to be parents, but they found out the documents were fake, and now they're going to press charges." The world seemed to tilt. My heart pounded in my chest. She had fabricated legal documents, claiming Alex and I were addicts, unfit to care for our son. She had tried to give away my baby, because she thought he'd overshadow Lily's wedding. I couldn't process it. "You did what?" "I'm sorry, Emily. Please, you have to help me. They're going to take legal action." I didn't say a word. My hands trembled as I ended the call. I couldn't believe the depths of her betrayal. She had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. The person who was supposed to protect me had tried to take away my child. Later that day, the adoption agency contacted me to explain the situation. They had halted the adoption process once they discovered the fraud, but now legal proceedings were unavoidable. Alex and I didn't hesitate. We decided to pursue legal action against her. I was done protecting a mother who had never protected me. After that call with my mother, I just sat there, staring at my phone, numb. My mind was racing and my chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. How could she? How could my own mother betray me like this? The baby in my arms, my beautiful son, had no idea what his grandmother had tried to do to him, to us. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually Alex found me. He took one look at my face and gently pried the phone from my hand. "Emily, what happened?" I took a shaky breath and told him everything. His face turned red, his jaw clenched in anger, but he stayed calm for my sake. "She's crossed the line," he said softly. "We can't let her get away with this." I nodded. "We need to protect our family." That night, we stayed up talking, trying to figure out what to do. It was surreal. We had a newborn to care for, and now we were talking about suing my own mother. But there was no way we could let this slide. Her actions were criminal, and she needed to face the consequences. The next day, we contacted a lawyer. Sitting in that office, explaining the situation, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and determination. The lawyer listened carefully, his face serious as he took notes. "This is a clear case of fraud and misrepresentation," he said. "You have a strong case against her." I nodded. "We want to file a civil lawsuit, and we want her to face the criminal charges too." The lawyer agreed. "Given the severity of her actions, criminal charges have already been filed. Your civil lawsuit will ensure she faces additional consequences." Hearing those words made it all feel real. My mother, the woman who had raised me, who I'd once loved so deeply, was now someone I had to take to court. But the anger inside me was stronger than the sadness. She had tried to take my baby away. There was no forgiving that. A few days later, the legal wheels were in motion. My mother was served with the lawsuit, and the criminal charges against her were official. She was placed under house arrest while everything was being sorted out. That didn't stop her from trying to reach me, though. My inbox filled with emails, one after the other, each one a mix of apologies and desperate pleas. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I wasn't thinking clearly. Please don't let this go to court. I'm your mother. I made a mistake. You promised your father you'd take care of me. Don't break that promise now." That last one hit me the hardest. My father's dying wish had been for me to look after her. For years, I'd tried to honor that promise, even when it hurt me. But this was too far. Using my father's memory to manipulate me was a new low, and it only made me more determined to see this through. Alex was my rock through all of it. "You're doing the right thing," he reminded me whenever doubt crept in. His parents were just as supportive. They took turns helping with the baby, making sure I had time to rest and process everything. I don't know what I would have done without them. Meanwhile, my sister Lily had her own opinions about the situation. She wasn't exactly quiet about them either. Word of the lawsuit spread through our family like wildfire, thanks to Lily running her mouth to anyone who would listen. She painted me as the villain, claiming I was doing this out of spite, that I wanted revenge on her and my mother for not giving me enough attention. It was ridiculous. This had nothing to do with sibling rivalry. This was about protecting my son. But Lily never did understand anything that wasn't about her. The worst part was that some family members believed her. I started getting messages and calls from relatives, asking what was going on, some even accusing me of overreacting. I tried to block it all out, focusing on my baby, Alex, and the lawsuit. But it was hard. The betrayal from my mother, the lies from my sister, the judgment from family members who didn't know the full story. It was all so overwhelming. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. One afternoon, after another particularly nasty email from my mother, I sat on the couch, tears streaming down my face. Alex wrapped his arm around me, our son sleeping peacefully in his bassinet beside us. "She doesn't deserve your tears," he said gently. "You're stronger than this, Emily." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. He was right. I couldn't let her break me. I had a baby who needed me, a family who loved me, and a future to protect. My mother had made her choices. Now she had to face the consequences. Days turned into weeks. The lawsuit progressed, and the criminal case against my mother moved forward. The lawyer warned us that things might get messy, but I was ready. This was a fight I couldn't back down from. One morning, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my uncle, my mother's brother, called me. I hadn't heard from him in years, but now he had plenty to say. "Emily," he started, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Don't you think you're being a little harsh? She's your mother." "She tried to put my baby up for adoption, Uncle Henry," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "How is that not harsh?" "She made a mistake. You're tearing the family apart over this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She's the one who did that. I'm just protecting my son." He sighed, frustrated. "Think of what your father would say." That was it. The final straw. "I am," I said coldly. "He would want me to protect my family." I ended the call, my hands trembling. It was clear that some people would never understand. And that was okay. I didn't need their approval. I had my truth, and I had my family. Alex hugged me tight. "We'll get through this." And I believed him. No matter how hard things got, we would get through it, together. The weeks after that phone call with my uncle were a blur of paperwork, meetings with the lawyer, and sleepless nights. My baby Ethan was my constant comfort, even when exhaustion threatened to pull me under. Holding him, feeling his tiny fingers wrap around mine, reminded me why I was fighting so hard. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting him, making sure he grew up safe and loved. But my mother, Eleanor, wasn't done causing chaos. Under house arrest, she was still finding ways to reach out. The emails didn't stop. Each one was a roller coaster of apologies, guilt-tripping, and thinly veiled threats. She swung wildly between begging for forgiveness and demanding that I drop the lawsuit. I stopped reading them. Alex filtered my emails so I wouldn't have to see them anymore. I didn't need that poison in my life. Then, one morning, Alex walked into the living room, his face dark with worry. He handed me his phone. "You're going to want to see this." I took the phone and saw a text message from my sister Lily. She had sent it to Alex because I had already blocked her number. "Tell Emily she's ruining everything. Mom promised to pay for my wedding. Now that money's gone because of her selfish lawsuit. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's finally gotten what she wanted." My hands shook as I read the message. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. So tired of the endless accusations, the endless drama. How could she still not understand? How could she still believe this was about her? I handed the phone back to Alex. "I can't do this anymore." He wrapped his arms around me. "We don't have to. Let's focus on us, on Ethan." I nodded. He was right. I couldn't control what my mother or Lily did. All I could do was protect my family. But just as I started to feel a sense of calm, things took a turn for the worse. 2 days later, there was loud banging at our front door. My heart raced. Ethan was napping, and the noise startled him awake. I rushed to the door and peeked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. It was Lily. She looked furious, her eyes wild. I hesitated, but I knew if I didn't answer, she'd keep banging and wake the whole neighborhood. I cracked the door open just an inch. "What do you want, Lily?" I asked, my voice flat. She shoved her hand against the door, trying to force it open. "You're so selfish, Emily," she screamed. "You took everything from me. Mom can't pay for my wedding now because of you." I pushed the door shut a little more. "That money was never yours to begin with. It was what I spent on Mom after Dad died." She didn't seem to hear me, her face twisted with rage. "You just couldn't stand that I was finally getting my big day, could you? You always want the attention on you." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. How could she be this blind, this self-centered? "I'm not doing this with you, Lily," I said. "Go home." I tried to shut the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You'll regret this, you and that baby of yours." Something cold and sharp coiled in my stomach. She was threatening us. My own sister. I shoved the door hard, making her stumble back, then slammed it shut and locked it. My hands shook as I dialed the police. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. She had crossed a line. When the officers arrived, Lily was still outside, yelling and banging on the door. They took her away, but as they did, she screamed threats, cursing me, Alex, and even Ethan. I watched through the window, my heart pounding. This wasn't just drama anymore, it was dangerous. When Alex got home, I told him everything. We sat together, our son asleep between us, and made a hard decision. "We need a restraining order," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. And we need to move. I felt tears prick my eyes. I hate that it's come to this. I know, he said, squeezing my hand, but we need to keep Ethan safe. We filed for the restraining order the next day. The police took Lily's threats seriously, and the order was granted quickly. She couldn't come near us anymore. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was sadness. This was my family, the people who were supposed to love me, and now I was afraid of them. As we packed up our house preparing to move, I thought about my father. He had always believed in the importance of family. He had trusted me to take care of Mom, to keep our family together. I had tried so hard, but some things couldn't be fixed. Some people didn't want to be saved. The day we moved, Alex's parents helped us load up the last of our things. As we drove away from our old house, I looked back one last time. A wave of grief washed over me, but it was mixed with relief. This was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh, to build a life free from the toxicity of my mother and sister. We settled into our new home, a quiet place in a different neighborhood. It wasn't far, but it felt like a world away. I changed my phone number, revised my contact information, and let go of anyone who brought more pain than peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. One evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with Alex, watching Ethan sleep in his stroller. The air was calm, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. "We're going to be okay," Alex said, his voice steady. I nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Yeah, we are." In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. No matter how hard it had been, protecting my family was worth everything. Moving to the new house felt like shedding an old skin. Everything was different. The smells, the sounds, the way sunlight filtered through the windows. There were no memories of betrayal here. It was a blank slate, a place where we could finally breathe without looking over our shoulders. I felt like we were finally free, but part of me was still waiting for the next blow to land. My mother's trial was approaching fast, and the reality of it weighed on me like a stone. The civil lawsuit was one thing, but her facing criminal charges felt heavier, more final. Some nights when the house was quiet and Ethan was asleep, doubt crept in. Had I gone too far? Was I really doing the right thing? But then I would remember the look on her face when she told me what she had done. The cold calculation behind her eyes. The way she tried to justify stealing my baby for the sake of my sister's wedding. That wasn't the action of a mother who had simply made a mistake. It was deliberate and malicious, and I owed it to Ethan to stand my ground. Alex kept reminding me that we were protecting our family, and deep down, I knew he was right. But it was still hard. The weight of my father's promise clung to me, like a ghost whispering in the back of my mind. The days blurred together as we settled into the new place. Alex returned to work, and I juggled looking after Ethan while finishing up my maternity leave. His little giggles and tiny milestones, the first real smile, the way his fingers curled around mine, gave me strength. When I looked into his eyes, I knew that everything I was doing was worth it. But even in our new home, peace didn't last long. One morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee, while Ethan napped in his crib. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I hesitated. Most of my family had stopped reaching out after the restraining order against Lily was granted. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. It was from my uncle. "Emily, I'm begging you to reconsider. Your mother is losing everything. She made a mistake, but she's your family. Is this really what you want?" I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Was this what I wanted? None of this had been my choice. My mother's actions had set this train in motion, and now everyone wanted to blame me for not jumping off the tracks. I closed the email without responding. There was nothing left to say. Later that day, my lawyer called with an update. The trial was set to begin in a week, and I would need to testify. The thought of facing my mother in court made my stomach churn, but I knew I couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about what she did to me. It was about the message I wanted to send to my son. That no one, not even family, had the right to hurt him or take him away. The week leading up to the trial felt like walking through a fog. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Ethan, sticking to his routine, reading him stories, and singing him to sleep. But at night, the fear would creep in. What if the judge went easy on her? What if she walked away with nothing more than a slap on the wrist? Alex held me close during those dark moments. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it," he said. "We're stronger than this." I clung to his words like a lifeline. The day of the trial arrived, cold and gray. Alex's parents came over to watch Ethan while we headed to the courthouse. My hands were cold, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. We walked into the courtroom, and there she was. My mother, Eleanor, looked smaller somehow, hunched and frail. For a split second, I felt a pang of pity, but then she glanced up, and our eyes met. Her gaze was cold, resentful, as if I had wronged her. Any sympathy I felt evaporated. The trial began. The prosecutor laid out the facts, the forged documents, the lies about Alex and me being addicts, the attempt to give away my baby without our consent. My mother's lawyer tried to paint her as a woman who had simply been overwhelmed, who had made a mistake out of love for her other daughter. But it wasn't love. It was control. It was selfishness. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and walked to the stand. My voice trembled at first, but as I spoke, I felt stronger. I told the court everything. How she had demanded that I hide my pregnancy, how she had shown up with fake documents, how she had nearly taken my son away from me. The betrayal, the hurt, the fear. I laid it all bare. When I finished, there was silence in the courtroom. My mother couldn't even look at me. The trial dragged on for 2 more days. On the final day, the judge delivered the verdict. Guilty. She wouldn't go to prison, but she would pay a hefty fine to both the adoption agency and us. She was sentenced to community service and mandatory mental health treatment. It wasn't the harshest punishment, but it was justice. And for the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We left the courthouse hand in hand, the cold air biting at our skin. Alex squeezed my fingers. "It's over," I nodded. "Yeah, it's over." But even as I said the words, I knew that some wounds would take longer to heal. My relationship with my mother was shattered beyond repair, and Lily's hatred was still out there, festering. But I couldn't control them. All I could do was protect the family I had built with Alex, the one that truly mattered. That night, as we tucked Ethan into bed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The storm was finally passing, and whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. The days after the trial felt strange. The tension that had been my constant companion for months was finally gone, but the scars were still there. My mother was convicted, and though she avoided jail time, she couldn't avoid the consequences of her choices. The fine she had to pay was hefty, and the community service hours stretched ahead of her like a road she'd never imagined walking. I didn't hear from her after the verdict, and I didn't want to. She was a ghost now, someone who had once been part of my life but no longer had a place in it. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would reflect on what she'd done. But deep down, I knew that people like her rarely changed. Lily, on the other hand, wasn't done making noise. The restraining order kept her from showing up at my door, but it didn't stop her from spreading lies and half-truths to anyone who would listen. She painted herself as the victim, saying I had ruined her wedding out of jealousy. At first, her words stung, but then I realized something important. They didn't matter. Her wedding was approaching, and from what I'd heard, it was turning into a disaster. My mother couldn't contribute financially anymore, and Lily's in-laws were hesitant about the marriage after the scandal. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Part of me felt bad for her, but only a small part. She had chosen her side, and now she was living with the consequences. We were busy with our own lives anyway. Ethan was growing so fast, and every day brought new surprises. The first laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he saw Alex walk into the room. These small moments were everything to me. They were pure, untouched by the drama of the past. We settled into our new home, filling it with warmth and love. Alex's parents visited often, bringing home-cooked meals and helping with Ethan. They never asked about my mother or sister. They knew that chapter was closed, and I was grateful for their quiet understanding. One afternoon, I sat on the back porch, Ethan playing with a toy on a blanket beside me. The sun was warm on my face, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. I closed my eyes and let myself feel the peace that surrounded us. For so long, I had been trapped in a storm, fighting to keep my family safe. Now, the sky was clear. Alex joined me, his arm brushing against mine as he sat down. We watched Ethan together, our son's laughter floating up like a melody. "We made it," Alex said softly. "Yeah," I whispered. "We did." But even though the worst was behind us, healing took time. Some nights, I still woke up with my heart pounding, haunted by dreams of losing Ethan. The betrayal ran deep, and the wounds weren't going to vanish overnight. But every time I held my son, every time I looked into his trusting eyes, I felt stronger. I didn't need my mother's approval. I didn't need my sister's acceptance. I had my family, the one I had built, the one that truly mattered. A few weeks later, we finally took that weekend trip Alex had been planning. We drove out to visit his grandparents, who lived in a quiet, picturesque town. They were thrilled to see Ethan, their eyes sparkling with joy as they held him. As we sat around their kitchen table, sipping tea, Alex's grandmother reached for my hand. Her grip was soft but strong. "You've done the right thing, Emily," she said. "Protecting your child is the greatest act of love." Her words settled deep in my heart, reinforcing what I already knew. I had chosen to protect my son, no matter the cost, and that was something I would never regret. When we returned home, life felt simpler. We focused on the little things: evening walks, family dinners, and quiet moments that made up the fabric of our lives. The noise from my mother and sister faded, replaced by the sounds of our own happiness. One morning, I received an unexpected letter. It was from my mother's lawyer, informing me that Eleanor had started her mandatory mental health treatment. I didn't know if it would change her, and honestly, I didn't care. That door was closed. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I took the letter and placed it in a drawer, out of sight. It didn't matter anymore. My focus was on the future, on raising Ethan in a home filled with love, kindness, and respect. The kind of home I never had. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Alex wrapped his arms around me. Ethan cooed softly in my arms, his little head nestled against my shoulder. "We're going to be okay," I said, more to myself than anyone else. Alex kissed my forehead. "We already are," and in that moment, I knew it was true. The storm had passed. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. My family was safe, my son was loved, and that was all that mattered.